Hello, Divas. Yes, welcome back. I am so excited. We have a great show for you this week. We just got back from the Florida Media Conference, and I love this annual event. It is the Florida Society of News Editors give out their annual awards, and I'm pleased to say, I hope it doesn't sound too braggadocious, but I am pleased that the News Service of Florida and Mike Exline, our producer, and I, your humble hostess, we did win first place for Deeper Dive in our category. I'm not sure what that category was, but yay us. There, I do it for everyone else. I'm going to do it for us. Little hand of applause. So thank you to the Florida Society of News Editors for that. And their motto is to advance the cause of responsible journalism. I don't think we really could have a more appropriate slogan than that nowadays. So thank you to FSNE. Thank you to the Florida Press Association for organizing the event. And I just want to take a moment to tell you what a thrill it was, really a delight, to be with so much talent, all the award winners from the daily newspapers to the local newspapers to the hyperlocal to the weeklies, and just being around the people who've been in journalism forever and a day, like myself, and also for those who are new and up-and-comers. It gave me a lot of hope for not only the future of journalism, but for the future of, everyone that we're covering. It's really important. This watchdogging is very important, and I wanted to give a special shout out. One of the highlights of my time there was Garrett Shanley, the editor of the Independent Florida Alligator, who is a student at the University of Florida, wrote a big story about Ben Sass. And Vivian Surratt, I'm probably mispronouncing her name. She also was a J School student there, and she's graduated and she has a great job now. They were our keynote speakers before the awards were given out. And of course, their great advisor, Ted Brightus, who teaches investigative reporting at the University of Florida. So he's their mentor and he moderated that panel. It was great. So I just wanted to say a big thank you to all of you who are still knocking it out of the park and watchdogging and reporting on local news and high school sports and keeping all our neighbors informed. So this week and next week, we will have a 2-part episode. And our guests today, I'm so excited because we have a cornucopia of news experts for you. Today, we have Kat Wingert, the COO of the Observer Media Group. They operate and publish a series of hyperlocal, that's what she calls it, hyperlocal community newspapers in the Gulf Coast around the Sarasota area, a couple of business publications in the Orlando area, and one also in Jax. And she gives us a perspective that we don't normally come across in the kind of reporting that I do. More along my lines is Sergio Bustos, the Vice President for News at WLRN. Sergio will give us some insight into a federal freeze on funding for public radio and public television might affect what happens when you turn on the dial at home, wherever you are around the state. He gives us a really great insight into not only that, but also how, is there a chilling effect going on in covering politics nowadays? You'll want to listen to that. You'll definitely want to hear what he has to say. So stay tuned, get your popcorn ready or your coffee or whatever. You are listening to the award-winning Deeper Dive.
Yes, we have the internet, so we're all connected globally. Yes, we have 24-hour television. You have streaming. You have all these sources. But at the end of the day, when the lights go out, there's one thing that does survive: radio.
You're listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida. Let's dive in.
Divas, Oh my goodness. I'm really thrilled to be here with a special guest, friend of mine. I like to call him a friend of mine. He doesn't know that he's my friend, but he does now. Sergio Bustos, the Vice President of News for WLRN. Welcome to Deeper Dive.
Dara, thank you for the invitation. Great to see you again here at the Florida Media Conference. Seems like that's the only time we actually see each other in person.
I know we see each other once a year.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You were just telling me the largest public
We're South Florida's only public radio station based in Miami, but we cover the whole region. So it extends from the Florida Keys all the way to Palm Beaches.
That's great. And that is centered in Miami-Dade County.
Right.
And you've got quite a bit of news going on down there.
Yeah, usually we're covering news. Now we're the news subject.
You are both.
Yes.
I mean, you're covering and the subject. But talk about, I heard you talking a little bit about this during one of the panel discussions yesterday. Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, as journalists, we like to just get to the point, get the numbers, and here are the numbers. With the Rescission Act by Congress, coupled with Governor Ron DeSantis's veto of state funding for public radio and public TV, we're taking about a $2 million hit at WLRN. We have a budget of $14 million, so $2 million is significant. And the $2 million came from through the Corporation of Public Broadcasting in terms of federal dollars, and then we took a $500,000 hit from the state when, again, DeSantis vetoed public funding for public radio and public TV in Florida.
Give us a little bit of context. What does that mean for you? Now, I'm a member of my local public radio station up in Tallahassee, WFSU. Love them. What does that mean? When they do the fundraising drives, they often tell you, some of the shows that we like to listen to, Fresh Air, things like that, they cost X number of dollars per year. But functionally, tell us what a $2 million cut to your budget means in terms of what coverage, what program, how that affects programming.
No, it's a good question because this is where I think there's been a little confusion. NPR itself, National Public Radio, says they're taking a 1%. They get 1% of their funding from the CPB, the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. Well, with the elimination of this agency and the disappearance of all funding, NPR is not going to take just a 1% hit because they also rely on programming fees. They charge all the member radio stations for programming.
Right.
So for us, I think we pay NPR about 1.2 to 1.5 million a year for All Things Considered, Morning Edition, Weekend Edition. I think Fresh Air is also part of that lineup.
Right.
So these are shows that are, I mean, to be perfectly blunt, we now have to look at the spreadsheet, see how much each program costs us, and then determine whether we'll keep it. In our case, we do have a reserve fund that'll help us, so we don't expect to cut anything because at the end of the day, these shows are also why audience tune us in.
And like me, why we donate, right?
Correct. It's a bit of a catch-22. We could save money if we cut back on programming, but then we'd have to create our own programming, which would actually be more costly and maybe not as popular because Fresh Air, Morning Edition, All Things Considered, already have brand name recognition with our audience.
Is there a concern that if you don't provide this programming, you say you're not going to make any programming changes, but maybe for other stations, they have to cut back. So they do away with that particular show, say Fresh Air, just for example. I'm imagining that's one of the pricier ones. And then, the problem could be you lose listenership because a lot of stations are now available online. I mean, I listen streaming. We listened to WFSU streaming all the way down in the 7-hour trip from Tallahassee to Port Charlotte the other day. So is there a concern that you might lose listeners that way? Or am I giving people a good idea that I should shut up about?
No, we don't want you to shut up. No, I mean, it's better to be transparent and talk about all this.
Yeah.
But For us, again, we'll dig into some reserves and try to cover the gap. We've been very fortunate that our funding drive, we've stepped up with all the talk in Washington and Tallahassee about funding cuts. And our donors, our regular listeners, have stepped up immensely. We've gotten several $100,000 to make up for the shortfall. The problem is not just this year, but looking forward.
So it's not sustainable.
Right,
Or is it
yeah.
sustainable, I guess, is the question.
Well,
I mean,
it's
how
up to
many
the-
bake sales can you have
Right,
to keep
exactly.
running a radio station?
Right. Ideally, you want to keep that government funding. But to answer your other question, again, we may not cut, but some other stations,
Right.
smaller ones around the state of Florida, may even consider going off the air because the funding cuts from the federal government and the state represent maybe 30-40% of their budget, and most of that money goes to buying the programming from these national public radio companies. National Public Radio,
Right.
American Public Media is one.
Right.
So that's the big concern all of us have, at least in the public radio world here in Florida.
Sure, and that's interesting because the public, one of the things I've seen in this coverage, and that I know for a fact because I live in Tallahassee, we've been hit with several storms. I know that WFSU does stellar emergency, round the clock, really, coverage when there is a natural disaster in the region. And I'm sure that this is the case in other communities. So what happens when that goes away?
Yeah, Dara, it's another good point because the one thing that's interesting about the time we live in is, yes, we have the internet, so we're all connected globally. Yes, we have 24-hour television, you have streaming, you have all these sources. But at the end of the day, when the lights go out, usually the internet you can't get onto, you can't log on anywhere. Even your phone needs to be recharged. But there's one thing that does survive is radio. And people do turn to the radio because they've got batteries for the radio, or they've got some way to, there's even a device that you wind up and you can keep the radio going.
I have one. It was really within the past 2 years, our power went out in Tallahassee and all of the cell towers were impacted. I could not text. I mean, forget about charging because you can do the pack charger, charging packs and sit in the car and whatever. I couldn't get a signal. Usually when you can't get a cell phone signal, you can text.
Right.
No texting, forget about internet again, no communication, really. The only news I was getting, the only communication I was getting was I had one of these solar powered crank up radios that I bought a couple hurricane seasons ago. And I was listening to the local public radio station.
And again, radio, that medium, is the one that can survive a hurricane. And oftentimes in a hurricane, and we've all lived through it as Floridians, you're just looking for some basic information. Are the gas stations open? Where's the storm? Are schools closed? That type of thing. And again, you can convey that easily through a radio newscast.
Sure. What's open? Where can you get food? Where can you get water? Where are they giving these things out? Sandbags, things like that. It's really, so I guess I've done enough cheerleading for public radio, but
we appreciate it.
Well, it isn't sustainable though. So what are the long-term plans? Do you think okay, well, we just need to bite the bullet for 3 years? Do you think this funding is ever going to come back?
It's interesting because in another life, I was the political editor at the Miami Herald.
Yes.
And I also was an editor of Politico Florida. So I would get asked a lot about the political climate. I think this is long term. I don't think a new administration, be it in Tallahassee or Washington, is necessarily going to change things because there's just a certain feeling out there. There's like an anger with everything, the way things were being done. And, Corporation Public Broadcasting goes back to 1969, 1970.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can criticize what they were doing, but at the end of the day, it was the establishment. It was part of the way things done for years. And I think that mood in both the country and in Florida have changed dramatically. The political winds are now flapping really vigorously. I mean, really loud. This could be one of those victims of what's going on. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's a reality.
Right.
People just aren't in the mood to pay for stuff that they think doesn't serve them.
Well, also, I think let's be frank, that there's a perception among the right, the political conservative folks, that NPR and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and PBS for that matter are too woke. I mean, that
Right.
we've heard that over and over and over again. And that's why they cut the funding.
This is my only criticism of NPR is really I wish they would have come back and actually served up the same kind of anecdotes that the critics had, because the critics were focusing on certain stories
Yeah.
done,
Yeah.
certain programming. Look, we all can watch a program and not like the point of view, but collectively, I thought there was a different story. NPR did tremendous reporting overseas. There was a great story done on a prisoner who got out of a Syrian prison, and it
Oh,
was a really telling story of what happened.
yeah.
We did stories on hurricane victims. We've had so many in Florida, but we tell the up close and personal stories. That's good journalism too. When Hamas invaded Israel and attacked southern Israel
Yeah.
on October 7th of 2023, we took a lot of heat after that because someone would hear a program, usually a national program, Here and Now, 1A, or All Things Considered, Morning Edition, and they would hear a pro-Palestinian voice and immediately say, see, you're favoring that side.
Mm.
And then in the same hour, there'd be a guest interviewed with a pro-Israeli point of view, and they would kind of ignore that in my mind because it was collectively we were trying to cover the whole issue.
Well, I have felt that there seemed, and I think we're on the tip of moving past this, but for a while in the aftermath of that horrific massacre, if you, as a journalist or even as a person, expressed any empathy for what the Palestinians were experiencing in Gaza, or you had a voice in there, not you personally, but if you had a voice saying, look, they're having trouble getting food in, there's no access in and out. I mean, these are facts. This is not a value judgment. And just by having those facts pronounced, you were anti-Semitic, anti-Israel. I mean, that seemed to me to be kind of what was driving the narrative. And now I think we're seeing that is beginning to shift.
It is a little bit, but again, we had a lot of complaints and we engaged with most of those listeners to try to explain, please look at collectively the coverage.
Right.
And we are trying to cover a very complex issue.
It's very complex.
Now, to some on each side, it's very simple. It's a black and white thing. I get it, and we get it. But we are trying to cover the diverse kind of opinions on it and try to explain as much history as possible, as well as what's going on in the present moment.
Yeah.
So, but again, we tried to encourage folks to look at the totality of coverage, and it was hard because people didn't want to hear it.
It's such an emotional issue.
Yeah.
That's why people are very dug in. If you have an opinion that's very strong one way or another, that kind of leads me into the next thing I wanted to talk about. And I apologize because we're doing this I'm freestyling here. Normally I spend a lot of time preparing my questions. And so we're just sitting down. I grabbed you, we're sitting down, we're having fun. And so I'm going off the cuff and I'm freestyling as I'm looking out onto the lovely Charlotte Harbor there. But we're operating in an era now where news companies or entertainment companies that own news programs like ABC News and 60 Minutes, they're changing their coverage or they're having to pay fines and adjust the way they cover news out of fear of being either fined or shut down or sued or whatever by the Trump administration. And I was wondering, well, you've already had your funding cut, so there's no risk there. But I was wondering if that's changing the way that you or any of your colleagues here at this conference are approaching the delivery of content and the way we cover news.
First of all, there's no kind of revenge factor, if you will, like, oh, let's now go really.
Oh, no, I wasn't trying to imply that. No.
Oh, okay. Well,
No. I meant there's a concern among major national newspaper publishers or news outlets that they're going to be sued or they're going to be punished if they cover the Trump administration negatively.
Yeah, I mean, no, there's certainly a chilling effect.
Okay, that's what
yeah.
I'm asking. I wasn't trying to imply that.
No,
I was
get
saying
it.
like, what can they do to you? You've
Yeah.
already lost your funding.
The
But
reason I say that is that, yeah, I mean, in some ways it kind of loosened us up that we don't get any government funding.
right.
So, everything's game. But we were never that way before. We
Right.
just wanted to cover everything, whether it was against Trump, in favor of Trump,
Sure.
alike, because all stories get categorized by the audience that way. But there is a chilling effect because at the end of the day, it's dollars and cents. If you start to pursue a story, if you feel the danger of libel, and I've had a couple stories come up where, I don't think it's as sound and as airtight. And maybe in a previous life, I would have said, let's run it anyway. Now you're more cognizant of it. A couple reasons for that. Number one, we used to have more money. I'm talking about the media business.
Yes.
Now we do have to be more careful because we don't have a really healthy bottom line that we can say, hey, let's take them on.
Right.
By the same token, I don't want to be second guessing myself either. And I think that's the hardest part because there's this shadow hanging over you and you start thinking, well, should we pursue this story or not?
Do you feel like you are?
I think sometimes
I'll be honest
you are.
with you. I feel like I am.
No, you gotta be.
With the Governor DeSantis administration, like I feel sometimes now I won't say that there's something that I wanted to cover that I haven't or that I wanted to write that I haven't, but I have that conversation in my head about what will be the impact.
Yeah, I mean, even at WLRN, we've tried to have Republicans on our public affairs shows that we do weekly, the South Florida Roundup, the Florida Roundup, and it's hard to get them to come on. We've had guests have said they got to come on at the last second they go off, but I tell our staff, I go, they may not be talking to us, but they're still talking.
They're talking to me. I've had a lot of the Republican leaders on this show. I hope
that's good.
Yes,
but again, it's part of the perception of, well, you're a public radio,
that's
so you
right.
have a progressive point of view.
Right.
News Service of Florida, I think, is seen more as, again,
right down the middle.
The middle.
Well, we don't have an editorial page.
Right, the whole thing.
Yeah. But
so with us, we get a little bit of that pushback. But I still tell staff, I go, look, even if they're not talking to us directly, they're still talking through YouTube, through Fox News, Newsmax, podcasts.
Yeah.
It's interesting when the alligator Alcatraz story broke. The way we began covering it was a producer at WLRN saw either it was a Google News thing or something that Fox Business had done an interview with the Florida Attorney General, and he coined the phrase
James
alligator.
That's right. Alcatraz. He was on Fox News when
that was on June 23rd.
That's right. Before it was even open.
Yeah, I don't think they've ever issued an actual press release on it, but that's when that's because we are always keeping an eye on Newsmax, Fox News. We subscribe to all their news alerts.
Sure.
And so that if something pops up that relates to South Florida, we can at least re-report it. We kind of aggregate what they do, but it helps us because at least if they aren't talking to us directly, we do get a quote or something from them. Now, would we like to have them in person so we can, talk to them directly? Absolutely. But in light of that, we don't ignore them either.
Right.
We still bring their voice or their opinion on.
Well, I'm hoping to have a surprise guest next month that might interest you greatly. So just stay tuned for that. While we're at it, before we go, you mentioned the detention center down in the Everglades. That's in question about where it is. It's partly in Miami-Dade County and partly in Collier County. And so that's litigation I've been covering quite closely. You all have been tracking what's going on down there. You also have the TPS situation with
temporary protected status
for Haitians and Venezuelans and the Haitians
Nicaraguans too.
So tell me what's going on the ground that you guys are focusing on in terms of news right now.
Well, just a big, bravo to you and News Service of Florida. We're subscribers. We publish a lot of that stories on our website and the audio stuff that's done by your staff as well. To be honest with you, it's been an overwhelming story for us. Every day we could be covering Alcatraz and the TPS, and there are times we're overwhelmed by it. Luckily, we have content partners, and we also subscribe to the Associated Press and the New York Times to get some of those stories. But it's been a hard one because even our own staff has been affected. We have one producer, host on WLRN, whose uncle was deported. I think it was to Nicaragua. Most of our staff, including myself, a good chunk of them, I think half of us are immigrants or come from immigrant families.
Right.
So it's a story that hits close to home.
Sure.
But I still remind people that we're first journalists. We have to cover the story itself and balance it as much as we can. But there are stories that need to be told, and we're happy that at least we have the background to tell those stories in the right way. But it's a personal story for us as well down there.
And that's where radio really becomes so powerful in telling these stories, because that's what it's about. These are human beings and individuals. And I have family in Miami. My dad grew up in Miami and I grew up in Hollywood. So that's my home base is Miami. But you're hearing stories coming out about healthcare workers and hospital workers and folks who've been doing critical needs services down there. I was talking to someone, I don't know if you guys have been covering this or come across this, and forgive me if you haven't, I'm ignorant about it, but many of the home health aides and the people who are doing home health care down in Miami-Dade County and Broward County are from Haiti or are Haitian Americans. And I was talking to a friend of mine whose sister-in-law is being cared for by a Haitian American whose husband was here on TPS, and he was traveling back and forth, and he's in Haiti now and he can't get back in the country. So can you tell us what's like, those are the kinds of stories that you guys are telling?
Yeah, speaking from a journalistic point of view, this is a classic case of, as an editor, I'm telling my staff, we can't cover the whole thing. We're not going to cover the macro of it. We got to get the micro. In other words, we can't tell the whole story.
Right.
Let's just keep telling individual stories, and they're very powerful.
Yes.
We had a young woman from Florida International University. This is at the beginning of the year. Venezuelan, was on TPS, and she wrote a first-person account of the anxiety and fears she was having. Remember, these are TPS holders, these temporary protected status holders are in the country legally.
Yes.
They have a right to work, live. It's for a temporary period of time, up to 18 months. Bottom line is we had it, and that was being threatened to be taken away. So we had her do a first-person account.
Mm-hmm.
We've interviewed folks who try to, again, tell the story through the eyes of one person, not try to tell the whole thing because it's just so difficult. But that has been some of our best journalism too, when we tell the up close and personal stories of individuals or families. We just had a story this week that we told of a West Palm Beach teenager who's a U.S. citizen, got arrested by the Border Patrol, detained for 6 hours. And again, it's one story.
Was that the one where he actually videoed?
And he filmed it. Yeah, he filmed it on his
That's
iPhone,
right.
or
That's
cell phone.
right. And I did see, I believe yesterday while we were here at the conference, that they are not going to bring any charges against
him. No charges are brought against him. They charge him with something related to resisting arrest. And because the video...
There's a new law about videoing things like within a certain space, I think, when there's a police interaction, that you can't be within a certain amount of feet to do that. I don't know if that was involved in that or not, but I remember...
I'm not sure about that one, but the idea was that that's one story we told.
Yeah.
We had another story of a Venezuelan couple that were trying to get legalization, but they're here on TPS. And one of the things that came up in the interview was the mother was worried because she was pregnant, and she's worrying about the whole
Oh,
birthright citizenship,
Yeah.
Situation. So there's just a thousand stories to tell. We're trying to tell as many as we can.
I think that's great. Well, thank you for doing that. Anything else in the news gathering business that our listeners should know about that's going on in Miami or globally?
I think the story of the future now is going to be, and we're trying to pursue this, is okay, we've gotten stories of what it's like to be apprehended and detained as an undocumented immigrant or as a legal immigrant.
Right.
But now we want to know, what is life like when you do get deported? We've tried to reach out. We may have to travel to these countries.
Right.
But what's it
That's
like
expensive.
to be working in, say, Florida, South Florida, for many years for the same company and whatever you're doing?
Owning your own business.
Working for someone else, living here.
Right.
And then you end up being shipped back to a country you may not have lived in for 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Right.
What's it like to go back?
Yeah,
we want to tell that story.
I want to hear that story.
Yeah, that's what we're interested in telling.
Before we leave, and thank you again for joining me.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you about something that you guys I saw you were on a panel about philanthropic giving and how that is, there are for-profit media outlets that are relying on that now. Now, of course, you're a nonprofit organization, but do you see that as kind of the wave of the future for media, that we're going to stay in business because people are going to, out of the kind, there's foundational grants and things like that. Do you think that's going to help or hurt?
I think at the end of the day, just to give people to understand, I've been in the newspaper business, was in it for a long time, as a reporter, both as a manager. So I got to see the numbers. And essentially, the newspaper business was pretty simple. 80% of your revenue came from advertising, 20% from circulation. Essentially, advertising subsidized the real cost of delivering the paper. That's why you could get a paper years ago for 25 cents. And if you subscribed, it was cheaper. Mm-hmm. Those days are gone. The business model broke completely, broken by the internet. Mm-hmm. Now you have to essentially find other revenue sources to fund the journalism. When I worked at the Miami Herald and I started back in 2005 as an editor, we had like 360 employees. Now I think they're down to maybe 100, maybe 90. I'm not for sure certain of the exact number, but it certainly is not 360.
I heard them say Tampa Bay Times went from something like 460 to around 100. Is that, did I get those numbers wrong?
I think that's accurate. The point is that I think there's still going to be media around. I just think it's going to depend on philanthropy, some subscriptions, but they're going to be much smaller. You're not going to have a 360, 450 person newsroom. When I worked at the Philadelphia Inquirer back in the 80s and 90s, we had 700 reporters, editors, photographers, graphic artists.
Wow.
Copy desk. It was immense.
Wow.
Those days, I think, are long gone and they're not ever coming back. But I do think there is room for smaller newsrooms that focus on real serious public policy issues.
Collaboration
is going to be very important.
Yeah.
The WLRN, we have partnerships with the local universities and their journalism schools. We publish their stories. The Key Biscayne Independent, the Coconut Grove Spotlight. These are 2 digital websites.
Right.
And Miami Times, the oldest Black newspaper in South Florida.
Oh, that's great.
And we share content with each other.
Yeah.
I think it's the way of the future.
It used to be that we were so competitive, right? You didn't want your neighbor, your colleague, your press colleague to see what you were working on. You didn't want it's totally changed.
Oh, right. I probably wouldn't be talking to you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do the interview.
That's true.
And there was competition then, but we were bigger and more profitable then. Now it's a struggle and we need to share things.
I love collaboration.
Yeah, it's good. Well, one area we just has a panel on it was up in Orlando. They were trying to get some public records, and they were being charged quite a bit of money. So the Orlando Sentinel and other media groups in the area teamed up to pay for the
Share the
public
legal
records.
cost. The actual costs of the records, which can be
exactly.
expensive too. You have to share legal costs sometimes in order to get those records to be
Exactly.
Well, Sergio Bustos, Vice President for News. Is it for News or of News?
I think it's for News.
I'm sorry, I messed up at the beginning.
No
Vice
problem.
President for News for WLRN.
South Florida's only public radio station.
Thank you very much. Before we go, I usually ask this question of my guests. Crocs, yay or nay?
Nay.
Nay. Okay, nay. He's very well dressed. I just took a glimpse at his feet and I can see that he's not a Crocs guy just by looking at him. Also, what's the favorite app you use on your phone?
Oh, that's a good one. I've started to, and don't shoot me, I have started to listen to Joe Rogan.
Why would I shoot you?
Some people think it's heresy to go listen. I'm curious about the whole podcast world.
Oh,
What
well,
is
you're
it that
in it
draws
now.
people? Here I am. Yeah, the more I know, the more I understand.
Right.
But I do have the New York Times, the Herald, AP, the Associated Press. I keep those on the app, and Spotify. I
love
listen to daily.
Spotify.
Pardon the interruption. The PTI show I've watched for years. Now I love it because it's on my Spotify.
Right.
And I can catch it on the way home.
I
And then-
listen to Deeper Dive on Spotify too. That's how I get it. Yeah, I don't go on.
I used to listen to Deeper Dive on my laptop.
Oh,
it's on the
because it's a
weekend
work
and I
thing
have a
for you.
little time,
Oh, right.
And it's in the background and I can still be doing
Oh, that's
stuff.
good. That's
Yeah, it
good.
works out well. So
Well, you can catch yourself not this weekend, but hopefully next weekend.
I
on
will.
Deeper Dive.
Thanks
and
again for the invite.
Thank you for joining me. It's been a treat.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
And we'll be right back with more from the Florida Media Conference. Divas, you know what time it is. It's time for the news in haikus. That's right, the news in haikus. News that you can use from the capital to the keys. We got you covered. The news in haikus. Don't forget, we'd love to hear your haiku. You can slide them into my DMs or you can send them to podcasts. That's podcasts with an S at e.newsserviceflorida.com. Wherever you're listening, please don't forget to subscribe and give us a rating if you like what we're doing. And we're back from lovely Port Charlotte at the Florida Media Conference. I am so excited to be here with a new G. This is somebody who I just met literally like 5 minutes ago, although I'm very excited to have her join us because we are here at the Florida Media Conference. We are looking out at Charlotte Harbor. It's gorgeous and beautiful weather here and a nice facility, but whew, that was quite a schlep. All right, now on to why you're really listening. And we are here with Kat Wingert, the executive editor and COO of Observer Media Group. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking a minute to do this with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
What is Observer Media Group?
So Observer Media Group is a independent, family-owned newspaper group, and we produce primarily hyper-local weeklies, business publications, and quarterly lifestyle magazines.
So what does hyperlocal mean?
It means that in the area that is covered by the Metro Daily in our market, we have 4 other papers that have divided up that territory and cover only that location, only that geography. So for example, our Longboat Observer only covers the barrier islands of Longboat Key, St. Armands, and Bird Key.
Oh gosh, got any openings?
It's a great job. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, so tell us what your publications are.
So in the Sarasota market, it is the Longboat, Sarasota, Siesta Key, and East County Observers. Along the Gulf Coast, we have the Business Observer. Our Orlando market, we have the West Orange Times and Observer and the Orange Observer. And then we have the Jacksonville Daily Record over in Jacksonville, which is another business publication.
Okay, great. Thank you for joining us. And we've been hearing a lot about I do statewide coverage, so kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from what your reporters are doing. What would a front page of yours look like? What would be the stories that would get the most attention or the most clicks?
So we're definitely the local government watchdogs. So right now we're in budget season. Yep. So
are you getting doged?
Manatee County is.
I know.
Doged.
Right.
There's an audit that's going to be starting shortly for them. But yeah, a lot of that local government news. So school board, city council, town commission, all of that, as well as community news. So church functions. We had a great story on a 100-year-old woman who plays taps every single day from the balcony.
No.
Siesta Key condo, and people come and gather at sunset every day, and she never misses a day, and she always times it perfectly.
Oh my gosh. So in Key West, they have the sunset. In Siesta Key, they have the 100-year-old lady who plays taps.
Yes.
That's wild.
Yeah. So the stories can run the gamut. Anything in the community is of interest. Yeah.
That is really wild. What's the story that's gotten the most interest in the past couple of months for you?
I think just this week, one that was of great interest was FDOT's ruling that sidewalk art and crosswalks can no longer be art. They have to be in compliance with FDOT
No more
standards.
LGBT. She doesn't know me at all, Divas. Otherwise, she would have known that I was going to go right there. Yeah.
Well,
no more rainbow flags in the crosswalks. And I know because I used many, many moons ago, worked for the Palm Beach Post. And I saw several stories about they had to paint over the intersections, and I think Boca, maybe not Boca, it was maybe Boynton, I think was one of the communities. But I interrupted you. But
that's okay. So some of that, but then also we had this sidewalk art project where each artist got a square, and there were 100 squares of them, and they went through a history project highlighting parts of Sarasota's history, and they created a block of art representing a piece of that all along this Burns Court area. So things like that aren't in compliance either, where they're really not political. They're artistic expressions of our history. So,
gosh, and that's a very artsy community down there. And, we have in Tallahassee, I don't know what they are, but they're these like electrical boxes or some sort of a box.
Right. Yeah. The big green boxes.
The big green boxes. Yeah. And we have them. They have all been decorated by local artists, and they're gorgeous. And St. Pete my daughter lives in St. Pete, so I go there a lot. They have this great murals. They have tons of murals. We have quite a few murals in Tallahassee too. Yeah. But somehow, no, you can't do it on the sidewalk or on the roads. What was the reaction?
I think it was mixed, as are with a lot of these, but I think a lot of people were standing up for the projects that aren't political and really feeling like it's a one-size-fits-all solution that doesn't really fit us.
Right, because we're not out there, maybe it's a conservative community where you all are, or maybe not because you're more on the beaches part of it.
It's a mix in downtown Sarasota, and then I would say that we're more red leaning surrounding it.
Red leaning, that's kinder. So but it's just like, what art, it seems kind of, why pick on us?
Well, it's definitely, and I understand it's government. When you have a rule, you have to enforce it across the board. You can't pick and choose. So I do believe that they can apply for an exemption for it. So that's kind of what we're looking at, seeing if a follow-up story might be in the works.
That would be interesting. But you know what? Who gets to be the decider? That raises questions to me, because I do tend to get a little outside my lane when I'm podcasting. Nobody cares what Dara Cam thinks. It does raise questions about what is appropriate and what is inappropriate and who gets to be the decider. So I think that's why they did the law like nothing,
right?
Because they didn't want to target rainbows, which is really what they were targeting. I mean, that's, and I maybe not just rainbows, but I think there was at the time Black Lives Matter kind of
and that
thing.
Was one of our crosswalks that came out of that movement.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
So you did sort of raise a few eyebrows or ruffle some feathers maybe down there.
Yeah. I mean, it would be one of the ones, if that's what they were targeting, it would be an example of that.
Yeah. So getting into politics, then you do cover the budget and some politically tinged news events. And I was wondering, with what's going on, and the last person I talked to about this, the publisher of a small weekly in Wauchula, I was telling you about him before we came in here. I asked him this question, and he said it doesn't really apply to him, but the president is now really targeting media companies, large national media companies that are making, they're getting sued, they're making deals. I'm just wondering, with this change in the administration or these events occurring where the company that owns, it's Paramount, right? They've just agreed to pay a boatload of money in order to avoid being shut down, or I don't know what.
I believe they had a merger they were trying to get through.
Okay.
So they had a good financial interest.
All right. So they had an incentive.
Yeah.
Right. So you know more about this than I do. I've been busy alligator Alcatrazing for the past week. But my question is there like a concern about we have to be cautious in how we cover the news, or do you think that is that something that newsrooms are talking about? We're here with all the editors and the publishers. Is that something that you all are talking about?
Not for us. This is sort of the beauty of hyperlocal news. And even though we see some of that dip into our world, as politics does, no. And this is the other beauty of being privately owned and independent. There hasn't been any chilling effect or any concern really within our newsroom.
Well, that's great. When I worked for the Palm Beach Post, they were owned by the Cox sisters. And that was a lifetime, literally ago, more than a lifetime ago. That has certainly changed. So that gives you the freedom. I was listening to one of the panels yesterday, and they were talking about the value of community news and the importance of that in terms of sustainability in delivering news of content, actually, to all audiences. I mean, the high school sports, that's the people want to know. They want to know, is Publix going to be open? I mean, this just sounds parochial, but they do want to know these things.
Well, and I always say it, and I put this in our job ads that we put out, is that the things that affect you most are here. So although the national things get a lot more attention, what's going to affect your taxes on your property taxes, or who's educating your kids, or what they're being taught, is all here. So we focus on the things that will touch people way more than some of the stuff that's happening on the national level.
It really is the things that affect you directly, even though, in my world, we're all getting worked up over this tweet or that, whatever.
Exactly.
And it just, when I love coming down here because I talk to you, I talk to Mike from the Wauchula, it's not the Wauchula, it's the Herald Advocate. It reminds me, like, what I do is important, and what we all do is important, but it touches people, to use your word, in very different ways. And I need to be more mindful of that. Like, sometimes I feel that we in Tallahassee and the Capitol Press Corps are writing for each other.
I can see where that would be a danger.
And that's why I love having these conversations, because I get to talk to real people about real things. So what has been the biggest challenge for you all as the news landscape changes dramatically?
Yeah, so I would say as we continue to grow and thrive because of that focus on hyperlocal journalism, that's really relevant to everyone who's reading our publication. It's that people are expecting us to cover more and more and pick up a lot of things that maybe the Daily may have covered in the past and they no longer do.
Oh.
So we're trying to stay in our lane and our hyperlocal lane while also being very aware that there are things out there in the community that lack coverage and need more coverage, and trying to figure out what's our role in that and where's our balance.
Oh, that is really interesting, with the cuts to the big newsrooms, and that people are looking to you more. Can you give us an example of that? Or
I think one of the things that we're considering now is more county coverage of Sarasota County. And also we've had this with Manatee County too. So we cover east of the interstate in Manatee County. We don't really cover Bradenton, downtown, the city of out west.
Okay.
But so we're focusing on issues that are there, but there are other larger issues that are going on. And so how do we frame them from our lens and our relevance for our readers? While we know there's a greater need out there. The same thing is going on in Sarasota County. All the growth is out east. We don't distribute a lot out there right now, but we're looking at hiring someone who can focus just on county coverage, which is not something that we focused a lot on in the past, but we're kind of being pushed into that role because there's so much going on that we feel like there's a need there.
That's really interesting. So trying to thread that needle, but also it does, what you're saying does sort of validate what they were talking about, that people are really demanding local news, and that community news is what's driving growth in our industry, which in many ways is not growing because there's so much content available for free and here, there, and everywhere. How do you guys handle the internet? How much do you rely on getting your stories out online?
So we're a digital first newsroom. So everything goes up on the web first.
Right.
And then we're sort of curating for print and maybe writing the day after story, fleshing that out more, working with design and all the things that print does so well. We're pulling it from the website for print every week. It's a luxury being a weekly, being able to do that.
Yeah.
And we also have found that those are two different audiences, the print audience versus the online
Interesting.
audience. Yeah.
And I was talking to Mike. I think they have like 10,000 subscribers in a community. They have 3,000 subscribers, and I think they have 30,000 people in the community, and like they have 800 online subscribers, or there's something very new for them.
Yeah.
So do you have online subscribers then? Or
so we're free.
You're free,
Yeah,
right?
other than our business publications, that's the only subscription model. But it's really the beauty of why we get to do what we do, because we have a really large distribution, and that keeps us free, and it also keeps us accessible to everyone in the community, which is important.
That's great. I love what you're doing, and I love the whole privately owned, you don't own a dairy. Were you there?
I know. We thought instead of a dairy for Sarasota, maybe we would do like a cocktail delivery service.
Okay, well, I need to explain to the listeners. We had one of the panelists was saying how they bought a newspaper in Missouri?
Yeah, Washington, Missouri.
Washington,
the
Missouri.
Companies.
The Hoffman Companies. They bought the Washington, Missouri newspaper, and they also bought a dairy. Yes. And so and this was just like as an afterthought. He said, well, they do, because they did this when he was a kid, the dairy does home delivery of glass bottles of milk, which I didn't even know is allowed anymore, but I certainly wouldn't want to do that in Florida. It's 99 degrees out.
Right. I'm not sure that would work here.
Right. So anyway, they deliver the ice and the ice cream. Forget about it. Yeah. You couldn't even get it off the truck. So they deliver the milk in bottles and the ice cream to the door, and in the gray box, they also stick a copy of the newspaper. And I was joking with my colleague. I said, okay, well, here's how newspapers are going to get themselves out of the slump. They're going to just throw them in the box with the milk delivery. Buy a dairy. That was just kind of funny. But milk cocktail delivery would work great in Sarasota.
Yeah, one of my colleagues, who is a brilliant marketing mind, was coining it Wine 1-1.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. So what do you think is your biggest challenge? You kind of maybe alluded to it already, going into 2026 or over the next year until I see you and corner you again next year.
I think it's hiring. Finding great journalists is more and more of a challenge. So I think that as we look to expand and hire more, finding the right people who can really do that coverage and understand what we do is probably the biggest challenge.
And something uplifting for those of us in the media business?
Well, I know that as media people, we often like to lament about the state of the industry. However, there's a lot of bright spots, and they're not necessarily the most noticeable ones. So the same thing that we were talking about news on the national level and that feeling, if you go down to that local level, sometimes you can find the bright spots there. And we're certainly one of them. We're growing, we're thriving. And so a lot of these themes that are being told about media right now are not true for us. So we're still doing great. We're covering community. People are getting news. They have multiple sources in Sarasota. It's a really rich area for media. So that's good news.
Oh, that's awesome. And also we've got the podcast, which is free. Everybody can listen to it for free. So that's a bright spot for on my end. That was a shameless self-promotion right there.
Well, it's your podcast.
We did win the Podcast of the Year award yesterday.
Congrats.
So from you guys, or from the group here. So all right, Kat Wingert, this is a question that we ask all of our guests, if I remember to do so. Crocs, yay or nay?
Crocs at home, yay. I use them for gardening, but not in public.
Okay.
Then they're a nay.
Okay. Well, I'm sitting here and she's wearing these fabulous shoes, and I'm writing down the name of them so that I can order them online, which I probably will do during the lunch session. And those of you divas know that I asked this question because I fractured my tibia 2 years ago, and I was in a wheelchair for 3 months and could not walk, and also I could not get my foot into shoes. And so Crocs saved my life in a way. And I do have a pair of leopard print ones that you will see me in them at Walgreens or at Whole Foods. So,
well, you can apply for an exemption as well. I would grant one if I were the style police.
Oh my gosh,
I would
she is very stylish. She gets my style award for here. So thank you, Kat Wingert, executive editor and COO, Observer Media Group, for joining Deeper Dive.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida, hosted by News Service senior writer Dara Cam and produced by me, Mike Exline. Music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC.